Hello, hello everyone. This is part 2 of my Thoth Symbolism video. I'm so very excited to come back. And first thing off the rip here is that you may notice I am excluding the lust card from this video. I have lots and lots of information regarding the lust card, therefore it needs its own video because there's so much information with not only the symbolism, but also its place in the zodiac and how Crowley explains that. And so, like I said, that'll be a whole other video. And so therefore, we're going to start with the Hanged Man today. Now, what I've done for the purpose of this video, and I don't think that I did it for part 1, is give you the Hebrew letters that these cards have individually. And I think that what this does is I will leave maybe a Google Drive file, like a PDF file for you to download of what the Hebrew letters look like. There are 22 of them. And why that's so important is that a lot of the positions of the figures or something in the card will hold the shape of the Hebrew letter. And I think that that is its own version of symbolism in the card. So we do have to take that into account as far as symbolism. So right off the rip, the letter for the Hanged Man is Mem, that word means in Hebrew water. And water in terms of water and life, how water plays a role in life. Think of the seed and how the rain plus the sun makes the seed grow, but the rain is like has an imperative role. And I think that the Hebrew letter for water isn't just like lake water or, tap water. It's water in its restorative, life-giving ability. So that holds a place here because we see water at the bottom of this card. And with the figure upside down, it's almost like the figure turned himself upside down to get to the waters of life. And I think that, like I said before, the Hebrew letter here plays a major role in the symbolism. And we see that in other cards that have a heavier Hebrew letter symbolism in it. But we do see the water down here, and the light that's coming from his head, I envision that to be like an upside down tree of life. He's turned his self upside down to be able to gain a new perspective on how he may become enlightened. And it's about the evolution of himself. So I just, Also, I want to state that I have read in an article about Mem, the Hebrew letter for water, is that it also could have not only life-giving abilities, but a sacred baptism. So if you think in terms of certain branches of Christianity, you have to be baptized in order to show the world that you have become saved. And baptism is a beautiful ceremony of sorts because it is an evolution. It is a change in you, and you have essentially dunked, with the help of your spiritual mentor, you dunk into the waters of cleanliness to become clean again and to become basically a new person again. So I think that the water here plays a role in your baptism and your evolution as a individual. Could go off young here for a second, but we're not. Now, the light and the dark, there's light and dark here. The light up here there's rays up here with the Ankh, but then at the bottom, it's mirroring the bottom and how there's a play here on light versus dark. And I think that this represents the descent of light into the darkness, and how in said darkness, that's where the light is. We don't notice light unless there's some sort of darkness. Now the green behind here and on some of these light shards here and on these spheres that are on the triangle that makes up his body here, that is for Venus, the morning star. Now when I think of Venus, I think of like grace and more so like the grace of your spirituality. So this turning around, this sense of getting a new perspective, the backbone of that is the baptism or the grace involved in that. That gracefully we go through certain points and certain things in our lives to get clean, to become new people. The grace needs to be there. There's like a humility almost. Now he's hung from the Ankh, and the serpent, which is its complete opposite here, is signifying the creator versus the destroyer. And it's all about delegating the change in the figure. Again, playing a role versus light and dark here. And I think that what Crowley was trying to do was he put the light and the dark, but then also the Ankh versus the serpent. Just yet another nod. I think that there's symbols within symbols that all mean the same thing here. So the serpent at the bottom is laying in wait. But what is he laying in wait to do? He's coiled, and I kind of think of this as Kundalini as well. But with the change comes a level down at the bottom of wanting to be reborn, but not being reborn yet. So he's not gotten there yet. And I think that there is still more to go before the awakening, because I think that the awakening happens later on in the Major Arcana, but we'll get there when we get there. So this coiled serpent represents the want to be reborn, the want to change. See, this is just changing your perspective. You're not actually going through said change yet. You're ready for the change. Now, the grids back here, I've read a lot of this about how it could tie into Enochian magic and the Enochian tables of the Golden Dawn. And when we look at Enochian tablets, they have these squares in them, and they all represent something either zodiacal or angelic. And so I've read that could be it, that it's the magic and the goodness involved in this state. Again, like the grace. This is when we, according to ceremonial magic, in order to gain new perspectives, there is a level of ritual and a level of magic that you have to put forth in order to actually go through this. So this is more of a ceremonial, ritualized change that you're putting forth and sacrificing certain things within these rituals to enact this change. Now, I want to say this, that I often associate the nails here in the foot and the hands to be representative of Jesus almost, but they don't. They represent Val, which is the Hebrew letter for nail, and that's a nod back to the Hierophant. Again, there's the spiritual aspect here. Within ritual, you often do have a spiritual mentor, just like in baptism. That's the person that's performing the baptism. So this is a nod back to the Hierophant as an appreciation of your spiritual mentor, whoever that may be, and how they have played a role in the change, in the gaining of the new perspective. All right, so let's move on here. We have Death, one of my favorite cards in this deck. There's something about the Thoth, and you guys know me. There's something about the Thoth that pulls at all kinds of strings in my body. Not just the heart, but all kinds of strings that I feel just pulls me to this deck. And the Death card is no different. The Hebrew letter for this is Nun, which means fish. Life traveling through the waters of life. We had the waters of life in the Hanged Man, but now we have the waters of life in a more, we are dunked now. We're in the ocean of life, and we're like, it's almost like the hangman released his foot, and now we're swimming in the water of life. And that's why the Death card in this particular version looks kind of underwater, which is pretty cool. This card is Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars. So there's some play here there's some play here on zodiac as far as symbolism goes. Now, Scorpio has 3 parts that are all depicted here. Now, the lowest form of Scorpio is, of course, the scorpion. The middle is the serpent, which we see over here. So we have this scorpion right here, laying in wait at the very bottom as the lowest portion of Scorpio. Then we have the serpent. Now, the serpent is nodding to the serpent of Eden here, nodding to the role of, I guess you could say evil, but I don't really want to say evil. I want to say more of maybe a shadow aspect. Like, this is the shadow aspect of Eve, and you're giving into that. It's more of a Eve's individuation, her integration with her, both sides of herself. And that's what the serpent represents. And then of course, it's like, and it's almost back to this. It's back to the serpent. It's almost like a completeness of the lust card. And again, we're going to see that in a separate video. A completeness of sexuality in the integration process. So then the highest level is the eagle, which we see up here, kind of perched, I guess, on his headdress, or this Osiris crown, right? Now, each of these three, the three aspects of Scorpio, I think of this as the three levels, the three properties of water. And that could either be water as water, or a solid as ice, or a vapor and gas as with steam. And that's what the eagle represents. So we have to think of this as a very watery card. Again, nodding back to Scorpio as a water sign. Now the skeleton here, just right off the rip, the skeleton and the scythe are both symbols of Saturn. I believe this to be, as far as what I could ascertain, I believe this to be a nod to the devil that we're about to see. This is more or less foreshadowing what's to come. And I think that it's really powerful. But then there's also, of course, the death aspect of this. The transformation that's happening here in the waters of life. Again, I think that it's foreshadowing of the devil. Now, his crown is that of Osiris, and the waters here, again, because like Scorpio, but Osiris died in water. So I believe with this representing Osiris's death almost, or his fight for living, could be a nod into that story as well. The bubbles here, which I think Crowley states these as bubbles, but I see them as octaves, because I saw this beautiful paper in, I guess on Pinterest, of, I think it was from like an ancient text of some kind, and it was Octaves of Light. And it's the way in which light moves as a wave, and it looks just like this, and how it changes and how it grows further and further down the timeline, I guess you could call it. And I'm going to leave that below for you to look at, because it's very, it looks exactly like this. And I thought, what if these aren't bubbles? What if these are octaves? What if this is light and it's pouring down? And we, even me, when I first saw this card, I thought about these bubbles going forth from the groin of this this skeleton, and I thought that may have been a nod back to the sex magic aspect of this card. But it also could be Octaves of Light, how light moves and how the light is changing for us. So again, life-giving, it could be the sun, an octave of light that matches with the water, how we need both to grow. I took that kind of a role with it, but anyway. All right, moving on. This is the beautiful art card, which in any other deck would be Temperance. But for the purpose of this system, Crowley really wanted, the feel here is integration, full integration here. We see the marriage, I guess you could call it. We're going back to the Lover's card. These are basically the same card in just different phases. So we have to really think about that. Now, this is Sagittarius, and I want to nod back to part one for a second, because in the Lover's card, there was a Cupid figure on the top of that card, and I thought that could have been a nod to Sagittarius, and it was. If this card is Sagittarius, then having that Cupid archer figure on that card, it nods to this card, and vice versa. I think that there's a huge emphasis here on Crowley really wants us to know that they're the same, basically the same card. This exact card is just a complete manifestation of what we saw in the Lover's card. And so as this is being Sagittarius, this is representing Diana, an Artemis figure. Right here in the middle of this rainbow is an arrow. Now, if we go back to the Lover's card for a second, there are no arrows in that Cupid's quiver. The quiver itself says Thelema. So I think that is his will. That is the will of that card. is for the integration, and I think that that's, again, nodding back to that. Now the rainbow, that I don't know if it's different in any other version, but there's a rainbow here and a rainbow that seems to be her cloak, if you will, around her shoulders. It represents the word Qoph, and I believe that that is the last 3 paths on the tree of life. That now the top 3 sephiroths and paths are almost unattainable for a human, but they represent the possibility of getting there, the hope that lies there. And I believe that that is a nod to the star card, the hope we face in spirituality. I believe that that's what that is. The path for this particular card is Yesod, which is the moon, and Tiferoth, which is the sun. So it's, again, a balance of opposites here. The twins at the bottom of the Lover's card are now consummating their marriage of opposites. This is a complete integration of opposites. And I think that when we look at the Tree of Life versus the Tarot, it's almost too much of a coincidence for it not to play a role with each other. And for this to be a play on the Tree of Life between the sun and the moon, I just think that that's a beautiful thing. The robe itself that she's wearing, or that this figure, I'll call it the figure, is wearing, symbolizes vegetable growth, Crowley says. Alchemy focuses on metals because of it inherently being without growth. It doesn't grow. Metals just form. And therefore, growth is actually where change happens. So I think Crowley is saying here that the alchemists who were trying to ultimately replicate what vegetables do. They were trying to enact change in metals and, like I said, replicate how vegetables grow and how there is a need for growth. And yeah, the metals may be fascinating just appearing out in the earth, like underground. But there is no change there. And I think that they were trying to enact change by doing certain experiments. So, that's pretty interesting to know that. Now, of course, there's the sacred bees and the serpents on here, where the 2 figures had one on one robe, like a bee on the feminine robe and the snakes on the masculine robe. But here, they're completely mixed on this cloak. There's the main symbolism here that we must remember is that this is a complete integration. The symbolism is not so hidden and it's not shrouded in mystery here. All you need to think about is that this is a marriage of opposites, and you'll be able to ascertain what the symbolism means, especially if you look at this card with the Lover's card. The cauldron down here in the center of this cauldron, that bears a skull and a raven on top. And that is a nod back to the death card. The death we have just gone through. The waters of life that we just swam in and fought in. It's a nod to that. That's the waters of life in this cup. This figure just happens to be pouring the water and the fire in for the integration process. Again, if we look at the lion and the eagle here and nod back to the Lover's card, they have fully integrated. The gluten that the eagle is spouting out is the gluten of the lion, and the blood is that of the eagle. They have completely blended and mixed. And also, the fire and the water out of the cup and her hand here, or this figure's hand, I don't know why I keep calling her, mix in the cauldron, but then also mix down here. And I feel like this integration process, because so high the symbolism in this particular card is the blending, the fire versus water, the lion and the eagle, the symbolism of the masculine versus feminine, and the many-breasted goddess like Isis. The blend here is so high that I feel like that just symbolizes to me that the integration process is very complicated, not so much hidden and archaic. I just think that it is more complicated than we realize is to become integrated. Now, around the rim of this the background rainbow, if you will, is a Latin phrase that is a long way of saying vitriol. Now, vitriol is sulfuric acid. And what this statement means, I'll say, is it's a formula for the Philosopher's Stone. So maybe we reach immortality after the death card and after we integrate the opposites. That's the goal. We have to die, and we have to integrate what's left, okay? Because I don't believe death is in a whole sense. I believe death is in completely shedding all that is not you as the individual and the self and the what all that encompasses. And then what's left, we integrate. And once that's happened, that we will gain immortality, just like the Philosopher's Stone promises. Pretty interesting. Ooh, here we have the lovely devil card. This is a very phallic symbol, and I will refer you back to my sex magic video if you want to check that out. I really liked making that video, so if you're interested in looking at the cards from more of a sex magic way, go check that out. Now, the devil's, right off the rip, the Hebrew letter is ayin, which means eye. Now, we can see the third eye here, but also I believe the eye to be here. This is the vessel, the receptive, the brain, but also it could be the eye, right? The eye of the soul, the window to the soul, and what all that means, and how with our eyes we take in so much. And I believe that that's, like I said, the associations and the correspondences that have been placed onto the tarot are so profound if we just keep shedding the layers. Eliphaz Levi attributed the Baphomet creature that we see in the Rider-Waite for this card because of its Capricorn associations and idol almost to the Knights Templar, if you will. I've been studying a lot on the Knights Templar. I may make a video on that coming up. But Crowley thinks that this card is a depiction of Pan, this frolic, like once we've integrated, there's a sense of, because we are who we really are, there's a new love for self that seems to be overtaking us. And within that realm of finding our true self and our true colors, there's an aspect of just wanting to be with Pan in the woods and listen to his flute music and just go about our business and not give a shit. I think that that's kind of where Crowley is. Like, you know, do what thou wilt, right? Now, let me talk about the Tree of Life with this card for a second. This is on the path that's leading from human consciousness. So whatever human, how we perceive consciousness, how we are conscious as humans, it's leading from that to Hod. So, I'm sorry, that was Tiferoth, and then it leads to Hod, which is Splendor. And when I think of human consciousness, and like I said, we've gone through the integration process now, then what's left? This sort of play, this sort of new love for self. There's a splendor there, a new love that blossoms out, if you will. And I believe that comes in the form of like creative will almost. This phallus of creative energy is penetrating the receptivity of bliss, this bliss or splendor, like I said. Now, on the Tree of Life, this particular path goes like this. And the middle here is Tiferoth, which is the sun. And it's leading to Hod, which is bliss. But then the complete opposite of this is death, not art. Art stands in the middle, completely integrated between what? The devil and death. So if we think about that for a second, then this, and let's go one further, and I know this is a symbolism video, but let's just see what this looks like in terms of the Tree of Life. It looks like this. Now, if you think about this integration process, what are we integrating? Two parts of ourselves. We are integrating death and the devil. And then if we even look further on the Tree of Life, we are integrating bliss and endurance. How do we do that? We endure, right? We shed. But then we are blissful for what's left. And we can't have this without that. And that's where I believe a lot of humans don't know. And they They think they know, but they don't. Now again, like I said, we were nodding here as a foreshadowing aspect of Saturn. This is Saturn here. It represents the essential structure of existing things, the material world. This is Earth to its fullest power. And I kind of think of this as like Malkuth, whatever Malkuth encompasses. This is all the things that we can see, physically touch. This could be our iPhones. This could be our cigarettes. This could be the night at the bar. This could be the night out at the park. This could be all the good and the bad that we endure on this plane of existence. And I don't mean to spout out those addicting type of things. Those are just the first things that came to my mind. But it's everything that exists, real or man-made. And I think that that is a profound thing to think about when we think of Saturn, but then with this card as well. Because you think about all the things that we do, maybe the things that we are addicted to, or maybe the things that we just do in our mundane life. All of those have a holy place in our psyche. And I think that with this particular card, it could have like substances on it. It's every day in existence. We get trapped by it all. I feel like this is a trap that we are in. And the semen, which I call a semen, it's actually not called semen. This is just how I look at this the background being semen, but also chaos. And a form of madness that comes with being trapped in the mundane, not having an imaginary world, not having a dream world, not going to the astral, not activating your imagination whatsoever. We get trapped in the existing world and all of that, what that means. And I believe that that's why the madness takes over, because we don't know how to activate the other parts of ourself that we have available to us. The two serpents that are under this winged globe represent Horus and Osiris. This is like the blending of the two. This is the father being the son and the son being the father and them being both at the same time. This is, again, like I said, the semen in the background. The semen of Osiris would have Horus in it. And that's why these are these figures, these homunculuses that float in the scrotum here. That back in 1904 or whatever, that's how they believed babies grew. That there was, and especially Crowley, he didn't want the magic to be with only the female, right? But I believe that the science back then suggested that, yeah, the magic was in the female that had the ability to birth and have babies, but then there were tiny homunculuses that lived in the scrotum. That's how the male played the role. So I believe that's why that's present here. But anyway, that's Horus and Osiris of the snakes. The winged globe above them is a popular symbol of spirit. The spirit, how it may play a role in terms of this sex magic that I just said. This spirit, soul, and body aspect of things. And Crowley points out that the barrenness of this card, we see the madness, but then we just see this bland pink background. That seems to be like this phallic symbol here is floating in nothing. He indicates that this is morality, that it has no place in nature. That when we look at nature, we see the destruction and the cycles of life and as a form of beauty, but then within ourselves, we can't. We can't acknowledge the beauty of that. That we take too much stock in morality. And I believe that when in the book of Thoth, when he's talking about the barrenness of this and how morality has no place in nature, I think he's nodding back again to that leading to madness. So it's pretty interesting. Let's move along. Tower. This is letter Pe. I think that's, yeah, you say that Pe, which means mouth, which we see here, right? This beautiful mouth that's spouting out the fires of what? Mars. It's spouting out the fires of Mars. This is the destruction of the material things that we saw in the Devil card. As Saturn is the existing things, all things in existence. The Tower card, essentially its role here is to burn it down. Burn it down all to the ground if you have to. What has caused the madness here? You must use the mouth of Pe and the fires of Mars to eradicate all that's not serving you. Now, I'm acknowledging first the beauty of the material before we can destroy. So over here, the material existing world has caused us madness, but then within that madness, we have to recognize the beauty of it. Again, back to the morality. There's a beauty that lies in the cycles of life in the form of existing things. So once we recognize our own madness from that, and then recognize the beauty of that madness, that's when this will happen, when we least expect it. We must know the things that we destroy. Because if you don't know it, then you can't actively destroy it. We're back to the madness then. We're stuck in the madness cycle. Now on the tree of life, these paths, the path of the tower shares opposite paths, like here's the tower and here's two other paths. It's the Empress and the Lust card. Therefore, Crowley knew that he could not put forth this tower card without nodding back to those cards because of their correlations on the tree of life together. The dove here represents Venus and the Empress card, and then the lion-headed serpent over here is a nod to the Lust card. So we see them floating in the background behind this lightning as a nod back to those cards and its correlation with the tree of life and its paths and how they may coordinate with one another. Now the eye up here, that's the scary eye, and it seems to be a manifestation of light, but it's the eye of Horus. The eye of Horus that indicates the destruction of the previous aeon. The destruction, see right here, there's an integration here of Osiris and Horus, and how Horus is getting born via these homunculuses, okay? But then once he is, Osiris recognizes that Horus is going to take over. But then also think of a father's love, right? Or a parental love. He recognizes the beauty within his own offspring, but then also the destructive power of that. And so therefore, now that Osiris and Horus know that about one another, there's a destruction that's happening here. So I think that is beautiful. Now the humanoids here, again, like the Eye of Horus, is nodding back to the Devil card, the Eye of Aeon, or the Hebrew letter there. But it's also about them being geometric shaped, and they're trapped in the destruction. They're failing in their understanding of the cycles. See, they thought that they had the understanding and they were able to destroy, but what that happened was they got trapped, and they've shed their humanoid figure, and they're not recognizing that they need the destruction. That's why the Tower card is so scary sometimes, is because when it comes about and we're least expecting it, we don't realize that we have lost ourselves somewhere along the way. We don't realize that. That's why it's such a powerful thing that happens to us, a Tower moment. Now the lightning, as like the last symbol in this whole card, really. There's a couple on the castle, but there's like that little circle here is Malkuth, and then there's 10 frames in the window. That's a nod back to the 10 Sephiroths that link us to the Minor Arcana. So we're just going to stop at the lightning. The lightning scene here is nodding to Givarah, the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life of severity. What it's doing is it is eradicating and sorting out the obsolete. It's cleaning as it's destroying. Think forest fire. I always think of that when I see this card. It's beautiful. All right, the star card. The star card is probably, along with Lust, is my favorite, probably my favorite card. Now, first and foremost, like I said before, the first thing we're going to talk about is the Hebrew letter, and it's Hey, which means what? Which means window. I don't see a window in this card, but I believe that window here represents the window of the soul and what all that means. The window to the soul is where hope from Pandora's box lies, to me. Now the cups here, her beautiful cups, chalices, whatever you want to call them, are nodding to Aquarius, but also to the feminine, as they represent breasts and its milk mixing with the blood from her menstruation cycle. So her breast milk and her menstruation blood offers this pink liquid of life-giving fluids, right? This the hope of humanity that lies within both. There's a death transformation aspect in moon blood, and there's a life-giving liquid aspect of breast milk. And that's a wonderful cycle of the feminine, and also a nod to Aquarius as the water bringer, right? The roses that are down here in the corner, barely visible really, to me at least, there's roses down here, and they indicate fertile land, which is being fertilized by the liquid. Now think about back to the liquid for a second that I was just talking about. This figure here is Nuit, the night sky. So that nods to me to the life-giving abilities of the universe, of the galaxies, how we're all interconnected, how humanity is only a mirror image of whatever's happening out in the universe. I think that having Nuit as the main figure here nods to that. Now, as you can see, she's pouring the water on herself and over here on land. The roses represent fertile land, but then she's also putting it in the sea, which is behind her. These are nods to land in total fertile soil of the feminine, of the receptive, but then also Binah, the great bitter sea. It's like there's a dark aspect of this as well, and you need both the light and the dark of the feminine for the life-giving. Now the Star of Babylon is up here in the corner. That's a nod back to the Lust card. And it's featured like, it's like maybe like a form of love. Because lust isn't lust. It's a form of love that we all must face. This sort of questionable love that we have. And I think that that's why this is prevalent over here. And the swirl is just the swirl of the universe itself. Again, this is macro and microcosm in a hope sense. What does that look like? It looks like life-giving liquids. It looks like the divine receptivity of the feminine to me. And that's pretty interesting. These geometric shapes at the bottom, these sacred crystals here, are indicating that humanity has a vision of, there's a vision of beauty for the universe, but it's veiled. We don't know what the plan of the universe is, and it's shrouded in so much mystery. Hope is shrouded in so much mystery, and that's why it's there. There's another thing that's back here in this, again, in this other corner, that they look like butterflies. If we think back all the way to the Fool card, there was a butterfly. There was that meant transformation. Again, I think that is reaching towards the supernal triad of the top of the tree of life that Crowley states, but then also there's a transformation. Again, she's in movement. She's twirling as the universe is twirling. We must go with the flow, with the twirl, to be able to coil up the tree of life, just like these sacred butterflies. So, pretty cool. Oh, the moon card. Such a beautiful card. Now, the Hebrew letter for this is Qoph, which means monkey, which we see, again, that's that monkey here. We don't see on this card. It's a nod back to the Fool card, but that's the letter for this card. I actually don't know, because they've been so heavy on symbolism. I don't know why they didn't stick a monkey here somewhere. But anyway. But this is a Pisces card, so we have to have that in the back of our mind. Now, the bottom here is like these graphs, but it speaks to the abomination of the scarab. The scarab here that holds the sun. Almost like it's holding the sun because we're nodding to the opposite of the moon, as its opposite. But with the scarab, there's an abomination aspect. God in ancient Egypt is the rising sun, right? And Crowley says that this card is midnight, a liminal space. So there has to be some sort of precipice that we stand on in terms of liminality, right? So that's why this card seems to be divided. Not even in half, though. So that's pretty interesting, is that we stand on the precipice, but it doesn't have to be a complete 50-50. Now, as we see up here, the light of the sun pushes through this liminal line here up to this path that looks kind of sandy, and it has these yods of blood here. But what it is serum tinged with blood. Maybe it's a nod back to the star. The blood drips here. They're yods. They're yods of impurity. The impurity of the conscious mind, as this card is the subconscious. And I believe that it's nodding back to the hope that we face in the star card, but then also the impurity of the soul. See, we're just starting out with knowing that the soul is mysterious. He says that the path is guarded by two figures. One is taboo, which is uncleanliness and sorcery. He's darker. See, this figure is darker than this figure, almost like in shadow a little bit. And it's darker because it represents prejudice, superstition, dead tradition, ancestor loathing, right? The bad things that are weighting down in the subconscious. This is a nod to the shadow work that we must face. And it takes going down this path here, this little path of light that is in the moon card, in all moon cards really. It takes unconquerable courage, Crowley says, to go to the abyss. Unconquerable courage. Now, the other figure is Anubis, the god we call on for that courage. That's what Crowley states. The jackals, they wait for those to come forth with false confidence. This unconquerable courage is not courage from arrogance. It's real. The courage is real. Think of the hero archetype. This is you going forth as your own hero, the hero of your psyche. Not from arrogance. Not because you hear everybody talking about shadow work and you think that it's cool to talk about it, but never actually go. That's conquerable courage, which means the jackals are going to just eat you alive. That's what that means. You're not even going to get past that first gate. Now, they hold these like keychain looking things. I think of them as keys, like sacred keys to the unconscious, or the subconscious. But one is a symbol of Mercury, and then the other one is Neptune. So the Ankh with the symbol of Neptune here is, I think, it's a nod to Pisces, because Pisces is in Neptune. So I think that instead of it being a Pisces symbol, they're Neptunian symbols, as a nod to the Pisces that is this card, that is the fish of this card. And then, of course, the crescent moon here with the chaos. This little, like, gibbous here, I'll call it, is Earth. What we see way off in the distance. It's like we're looking at Earth from the moon. That's what it would look like. It's tinged with blood and abominations and all the bad shit that's in our psyche. It's like when we go down this path, we're looking at that like it's far away. And that's what Crowley's stating here, is that we're looking from the moon, like we've stepped foot on there, and then we're looking at Earth and all the bad stuff in our psyche, and we still need to get in the rocket. It's going to take that courage to get into the rocket and go back to Earth. I mean, I'm just trying to give you an analogy here. Anyway. All right, the Sun card. This is the letter Resh, which means head. Now, there's not like a big head figure here, okay? But I do think that the land here, the bulbousness of the land could be a nod to the head, to the Hebrew letter here. But it could be also found in the shape of the Hebrew letter. Some of these figures will be in the shape of that letter. The rose, very thing in the center here, is solar influence. The zodiac surrounds the sun, just like in in the zodiac now, okay? It surrounds it, but it's completely in order around the rows of the sun, around the solar influence, and how the sun influences the zodiac. The freedom that the zodiac faces being in orbit around the sun. So it is complete freedom. The green hill is a nod way back to the temperance card, the green robe, this fertile soil, this vegetable growth almost. Fertile earth, that's what that is. The freedom of that, and how it takes the solar influence to become fertile soil and to grow things. Now this red wall indicates the coming of the new aeon and how we're locking in with the solar influence, the new aeon. It's almost like the new aeon is wrapped in a little bow, so to speak. Now these twins are the twins from the art card. They were twins in the lover's card, and then they fully integrated in the art card. And now that they've integrated, they've gone through a few more stages since the art card, but now there's a freedom to them, a freedom to get back to who they were before the lover's card. So they're in a constant state of cycle. They have become eternally young now, almost like immortal in their youth. No longer fighting for the integration like they were in the lover's card. They're just eternally themselves, fully integrated. Now the two coins below here, they're like coins. They're nodding back to the other two aeons. One represents the aeon of Isis and Osiris. And we can't really see anything other than like some lines and some colors, but Crowley does state of them being representative of the two other aeons. And it's almost like you have to know history in order to move forward, and how that's important. Now the 12 rays here, there's 12, and they separate the zodiac. I just believe that referenced the decans in astrology, but Crowley doesn't actually say this. I think I've read this in a whole other article, but they do. I just think that, I just actually believe that because Crowley wanted this card to represent the solar influence of us, the planet, and how it's all integrated, he wanted to nod to the solar influence of the fertile soil, us as humans, as with the twins, but then also the zodiac and how that may play a role in our lives as well. And it does. The rainbow, okay, there's like sacred rainbow that the zodiac sits upon. It could just be symbolizing to me, again, a nod back to the integration of the art card, the sacredness of the light of the sun getting reflected through water. And it could be a nod to needing both water and the sun. But it's not as heavy, the water aspect is not as heavy in the actual sun card. This is just saying that it's taking both. And when you mix both, you get the rainbow. So, pretty cool. And then finally, not finally, but finally after all of this, I call this the finale. The Aeon card being the final, and then the Universe card being like the turning point to start all the way back over. But anyway, this is the letter Shin. Now, if we look really closely, there's these three figures down here, and they have lines with a little line here. That is how you draw the letter Shin. Now, the letter Shin means fire. That's how Crowley expects and predicts that the world will end, is through fire. Of course, the top is Noit, the night sky, this beautiful figure here. Her body folded over the universe as the mate of Hadit, which is the figure throned here. Throned in the solar light, the solar influence. Horus, the child of the new Aeon, is the transparent present here. It's almost like the transparent ghost of Horus is rising up to meet us. That's how I kind of think of that, in terms of how Crowley states it. Also, Horus himself is a representative of the winged globe that we see here at the bottom of this egg. I consider this an egg. So that's pretty interesting. The babes that are inside the letter Shin are threefold. They're in different phases,
Just like in the Rider-Waite-Smith, when we look at the Judgment card, there's a man, a woman, and a child. That's all of these. So this is Isis, Osiris, and Horus. Kneeling, there's this figure that's kneeling, almost in prayer, just like I said, just like the Rider-Waite. That's the mother. Then there's one that's reaching. This reaching up to the heavens as almost like a don't take me. As a resistance, that's the father. And then this central figure that seems to be in the fetal position is the child. The new child that's coming about. A nod back to Horus here. The arches at the bottom, we don't really think that they would mean anything, but they are. That's the top of the scales of Libra. So what you would hold to make the buckets balanced, if you will. And then finally, the Nuit here, okay, is shaped in the shape of Omega, which means the beginning and the ending. That the earth will end in fire, but that's how it began as well. With a solar influence, the fire aspect of solar influence. So anyway, all right. Then we have the universe card. This is the letter Tau, which is cross. Okay, we see a lot in the universe card nodding back to other cards, which I think is beautiful. But the cross, Tau, is the fourfold of the universe. That's why the fixed zodiacs are present. There's a fourfold to the universe, the nature of the universe. The oval in the background of this card is the Vesica Pisces, a balance between Keter and Chokmah. The maiden here is exactly in the same position as the hanged man, but her leg is opposite, indicating the freedom in the change that's come, not the restriction. The square that's behind her head is a square of light, right? But what that means is it's symbolizing matter and Malkuth. Like, see, the universe card is the turning point back to the Fool card, right? But we're nodding here to the power of the universe, but then also Malkuth being relevant here. Now the serpent who's coiled around, seemingly doing nothing, he represents the duality of matter, the good versus the bad of the universe, crossing her genitalia here almost, her belly button, nodding to the Kundalini, present within us all, present within even the universe. And the Eye of Horus, he sits close to Aquarius here as a nod to the new aeon, as a nod to the life-giving liquids as well of the universe. The grid that circled around is representative of Nuit, the starry night sky that we see in the heavens, right? All added together, they are 3 deep, and they become 72 emanations. Therefore, that's the material world of Malkuth. The earth is the green disc in the middle of that, where the light of her sits, and where this other thing is, this Mobius strip, I guess you could call it, in the middle of Earth. But the Earth is a green disc, but then that's a nod back to what? Venus and the grace there, I believe. Even though Crowley says that that's Earth. But I think it could be Venus too. The grace of the universe and the cycles of them all. Now this figure, this thing that looks like a geometric house almost, is actually a table of elements. That is the creation of the universe and how it was manifested. And then, of course, the ending is the 4 fixed zodiac symbols of the life cycles of man. Again, nodding back to the solar energy and the zodiac power within. Okay. Well, this has been so much fun. I mean, you know, there's so many layers to the Thoth deck. And please let me know if you liked this, and if you got your deck out and played along, or if you have something to add about the symbolism. And I want to reiterate here, just like I did in part 1, that the Thoth deck is a self deck for me. It's an exploration deck, and there are many layers. But I believe that the purpose here isn't to learn from another individual. You need to, yeah, the symbols may mean something, but they can mean something completely different to you. And I believe that that's the magic of this deck and the magic of the tarot. We see the archetypes that we need. And so come back in a couple of Thursdays for some more Thoth love. Much love, everybody.